question. Answer this one. What did you drink with breakfast today? Okay, we've got a number of responses. Go ahead and keep going, but let's see what we've said so far. Okay, so number one answer appears to be water because it has the largest font. You remember that in the word cloud, the larger the font, the more times that has been entered. So coffee and more coffee looks favorable there. Orange juice, a couple votes for tea. Okay, Starbucks, maybe that's more coffee. All right, well, that was just a warm-up, a reminder of you get to put in answers. Sometimes it's a word cloud, sometimes it's a multiple choice, and we'll see. We'll learn from those answers in my presentation. So today the topic is the second of three things that everybody should know about America. Number two, I'm going to argue that we have the most mobile society in the world. I now always make this next statement. This does not refer to phones. Several years ago when I was doing this, it didn't occur to me that students would think that, but then I started getting answers on tests where students would say, we have the most mobile society because we have lots of phones. No, that is not what I mean here. I mean mobility. I mean the movement of people for a variety of reasons. That's what I'm looking at here. I'm going to argue we have the most mobile society in the world. All right, so in a moment, there'll be another Menti question for you to respond to, and this is it. Why have you been able to go to different states? So on Menti now, I would like you to put in the reason that you have been to other states. Maybe there's more than one reason. Why did you go to other states? Ten seconds. All right, here's what you said. All right, so vacation is in there. Tourist attraction probably is the same sort of thing. Maybe scenery is also vacation, sightseeing. Okay, family came up there. Weather, sometimes we're tired of winter, right? And we go somewhere for the weather. Well, indeed, in America, we've got quite a few reasons why we go to other states. I thought we would come up with these and maybe others. Yes, family, vacations, business, job interviews. Sometimes the job interview is just local, but sometimes maybe as your career advances more, you may apply for a job that is out of town, that isn't even in a different state, and maybe you go for an interview there. Migration, yes, sometimes it's not just temporary. Sometimes we move to a new place. And cities seem to have an edge. Cities seem to have more things to do, more going on. Some of that's jobs also. Okay. So the next question is going to be this. It's going to be how. How have you been able to go to different places? And specifically now I'm saying regarding the American transportation system. regarding the American transportation system. How is it that you could go to many states? Ten seconds. All right. Yes, I certainly expected car, or here we have drove a car also, to be a very prominent answer, right? And this is one of the reasons I'm claiming that we have the most mobile society in the world. We have among the world's highest rates of car ownership. Now, we're in a VCM classroom today, so you didn't have to drive to the college, but in normal times, right, we would all be driving to the college. Maybe you yourself own a car, maybe your family owns a car or two, you're using a family car. Yes, but Americans have high rates of car ownership. Maybe you went otherwise on an airplane, okay, sometimes even the train or bus. Yes, we certainly have the means to get around. I would argue that we have the best road system in the world. That connects with our car travel. We have a tremendous interstate highway system. But in terms of miles of paved roads, we have the best road system in the world. Okay, certainly there are some other countries with great road systems. Germany is famous for its Autobahn system. And indeed, that is a fine set of roads. But Germany is a much smaller country than the United States. So even though they have good roads, even though, of course, they have paved roads, it's not nearly the number of miles of paved roads as we have in America. Consider countries that are of similar size to us in America compared to America. So, for instance, Canada is about the same area as we have, but we have many more paved roads than Canada does. Because, of course, the farther north you go in Canada, the more extreme the climate and the fewer people who live there. Thus, of course, fewer roads. Brazil is about the same size as the United States, but a big section of Brazil is the Amazon rainforest, which does not have many roads, not many paved roads. China is about the same area as the United States. China is definitely catching up, but a lot of Western China is mountainous or desert. Don't have a lot of paved roads going through there. China, of course, has many more people than we do, and yeah, maybe they'll get closer in terms of number of miles of paved roads also. All right, and Russia is by far the biggest country in the world by area. So yes, distinctly larger than the United States, but more than half of the area of Russia is Siberia, where there are relatively few roads also. So we can get around by car very well in the United States because we have the best road system in the world. Now, I would make a somewhat similar argument for air travel. I'm going to say we have the best system of airports in the world. But again, that's partly because of the numbers, just how many airports we have. We have more airports than any other country in the world, even though some other countries do have fantastic airports. The Singapore airport, for instance, is famous for its quality. Okay, but Singapore is a tiny country with one important airport. We have more airports than any other country in the world. Sometimes we do get around by train, Amtrak, but that is very much secondary in the United States. So I don't think I want to claim we have the best passenger train system in the world. Yeah, I do enjoy an Amtrak train ride, but it's just not something we do as often. Okay, but we'll put it up there because, oh yes, sometimes that happens. All right, so we tried to list there how, that is basically the mode of transportation. But I think the how could be expanded to some other things here. For instance, GPS. We have GPS systems now. Most of our phones have GPS just built in, right? So that helps us get where we want to go. That aids our mobility. We can get directions easily. We're a wealthy country. Yeah. Again, that may be car ownership, or it may be the ability to pay for airplane tickets. Gas stations. I rarely worry about running out of gas. Even if I'm driving across interstate highway and it's mostly farmland around, I really don't worry about running out of gas because there's just so many gas stations. There's so many little towns that have gas stations. It's, yeah, everywhere. So it's usually not an issue. Borders. What happens when we get to borders? What happens when you're driving along and you get to Wisconsin? Basically nothing, right? You look over there and there's a sign that says, "Welcome to Wisconsin." You don't have to stop. You don't have to show someone your papers, proof of who you are, where you live. You don't have to do any of that. No, you just drive in and there's a sign. We can do that all across our country. We can drive hundreds or even a few thousand miles in America, never having to stop at a state border. And, well, our neighbor in North America, Canada, we have an amazingly long border with Canada. What happens when you get to Canada? Well, it used to be, in fact, all you needed was a driver's license to be allowed to go into Canada. That changed somewhat soon after 9/11. And so now you have to have a passport. Okay. But still, it is relatively easy to go into Canada. We have, again, this amazingly long, peaceful border. In fact, the last couple times I've been to Canada, it took me a longer time to come back into America than it took to get into Canada in the first place. Yeah, so we have that ease as well in North America. All right, now we're switching the format. It's a multiple choice question. So, which country's citizens drive the most? And that's measured by total road passenger kilometers per person. Answer what you think. Which of those 5 has people who drive the most? Five seconds. Here's what you say. We're voting very dominantly for the United States. Okay, and maybe that was kind of clued in because I'm arguing that we have the most mobile society in the world. Well, that is the correct answer to yes. According to total road passenger kilometers per person, we drive more than any other country. Actually, that is the top 5 in order. Canada is second. Australia, Italy, France. Makes sense for us. I'm arguing we have the most mobile society in the world. Canada is a large country, so okay, that probably is a factor. Australia, we know, is a large country. Could be driving a long ways in Australia. Okay. And here's a way of looking at it. In fact, here is the data, but shown in a chart here. So the outside of the circle, that is a full circle in kind of a maroon color, that's the United States. And then you can compare that to others in the top 10. So the next one next circle is red, and that's Canada. Okay, then Australia, Italy, and France. So we're almost twice as much as France. After that, we see Germany and the United Kingdom. Yes, we are just about exactly double of the United Kingdom in miles, passenger miles per kilometer. All right, so which states have you folks been to? Well, put down a state or even more than one state that you think most people have been to. All right, don't put Illinois. We're all here already. But put down another state or two that you think, yeah, everybody's been there. Ten seconds. Here's our word cloud. Okay, so Indiana comes up high, Wisconsin, Michigan. Yes. Okay, and then we've got some places like Florida, California, Texas, and some that I would say is kind of in the middle there. Ohio, Tennessee, New York, Kentucky, Arkansas, Oklahoma. Okay, yes. So these are good answers, and the bigger the font, again, suggests more people answering with that word, with that state. Okay, good. Based on those states we just saw, based on these states, what are shared characteristics? What do those states have in common? Or what do some of those states have in common? Or you could think about it this way: why is it that you've been to those places? Okay, we've got quite a few answers in 5 seconds. All right, so weather is a good choice there. So we had California and Florida on the list, didn't we? Weather certainly would seem to be a factor in there. We got hot weather, warmer weather, and regular weather. Okay, yes, also a big one though, location. Close to Illinois, distance, nearby, you can drive there, neighboring states. Yeah, Wisconsin was up there, Indiana was up there, some Michigan was up there, states that are indeed quite close or even bordering Illinois. Yeah, it's easy to go to Wisconsin, isn't it? It's nearby. You can just get up and drive. It doesn't take that long. Harder to get to Florida or California. You could drive, quite a drive, but we often fly to those places, and we're motivated because it has great weather, because there's sightseeing, because there's cities. California and Florida have several cities, several notable cities each. Oh, they have beaches too, don't they? Yeah, so sometimes we're willing to travel farther, to longer distances, aren't we, for particularly attractive features. And yeah, California and Florida are good examples of places that are well known for that. Yes. All right, well, these are the things I thought we should come up with at least. What is it about the states that makes it true that you've been there? Nearby, yes, we did that, right? Vacation areas, yes. And I think we should mention large cities. Again, large cities have lots going on, whether it's jobs or tourist things to do. That tends to pull people to those places. And even if we're going to California to go hiking in the wilderness, well, we probably have to fly to Los Angeles or San Francisco first, because that's where the big airports are too. All right. Well, we're going to list right here now states you think, no one's been there. States that you think no one's been there. Well, you can start with, in your mind, states you haven't been to, and then think about it. Is that true? Do you think probably no one's been there either, or not very many of you have been there? Ten seconds. All right, here's what you're saying, and the most common answer is Alaska. Hawaii is out there, North Dakota, Nebraska, South Dakota, Arkansas, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C. is up there. Okay, Maryland. All right, so yeah, take a look at that list, because I'm going to ask you in a moment, what is it about those places that means that not many people get there? So let's look at the list for a bit. Okay, we got Vermont, Maine, Rhode Island, Maryland. We've got Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, Alaska, Hawaii, Washington. Oh, we got Delaware out there too. All right, so given those states, now, why has no one been there? Or I'm phrasing it, what are the characteristics of these, I should say, these not often visited states? Why haven't you been there? Five seconds. Okay, so, all right, distance. I love that word, distance, or far distance here, far away from us. Yes. Alaska, it's just a long ways to go. You really have to want to get there. And yes, it's going to be expensive. It's going to be expensive to fly there because it's a long ways away. And it's going to be a bit expensive once you get there. Cost of living can be high in Alaska because so many products have to be shipped there. Okay, what else? Cold weather. Well, that could be true for Alaska, but also for places like Montana or North Dakota. Non-touristy. Yeah. What are we going to do when we get there? We all have ideas of what we can do in Florida or California. What about Montana? What about Delaware? If we go there, what are we going to do? Probably there are things to do, but maybe we just don't so much know what those things are. Yes. So I thought we should flip it from the ones we had before. So now, instead of nearby states, we don't go to faraway states. Yeah, that's harder to do. It's more expensive. When we get there, is there something to do? Again, probably yes, but maybe we just don't know what that is. And that might also be because it's far away. And then no large cities. The flip of our other one, that we do go to states that have large cities. So yeah, what about our list? Does Alaska have a large city? No, Anchorage, but it's not that big. It's not what I would call a large city. How about Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, Maine? Yeah, a bunch of the ones on our list don't have a big city. They're lacking that city, that urban draw for us. All right. I have on overheads, but not on the screen, I have maps of students rating states. I'd like to tell you about them. Students were asked to rate the states just in terms of favorability, basically an opinion, how the students felt about the states, rating them from 0 to 100. Okay. And then the maps were made up based on where those students were living. So for instance, one map is from Wisconsin students like you, but all from Wisconsin. They were asked to rate the states. The states that came out the highest were Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, and California. And it kind of fits what we just did, doesn't it? Where have those Wisconsin students been? Well, probably Minnesota and Michigan are high on the list because they're right next door. They're easy to get to. They're familiar. And familiarity probably plays a role in the students feeling good about those places. Minnesota, Michigan are fairly similar to Wisconsin. So you like Wisconsin, you probably would like Minnesota as well. All right, but then also California. California. We often rate California high. Well, we know a lot about California. Maybe we've been there. Goes on our list of commonly visited states. And we see it a lot on TV. We know a lot about California. Almost without trying, we know things about California. And it's fairly appealing. All right. In contrast, the states that were ranked the lowest by students from Wisconsin were North Dakota and Alabama and Mississippi. Well, first of all, they're not next door. Second, they don't have big cities. And third, what do you do there? What's great fun? What's touristy in Mississippi? I'm sure there are things, but we maybe just don't know what they are. How many of those Wisconsin students do you think had been to Mississippi? I'm going to say very, very few of them. Again, it's not next door. It doesn't have a big city. And probably those Wisconsin students, having never been there, don't know what would be fun to do there. So they don't go there and they rate it low. Another map shows the students from New York State. What did they like? New York and a bit of the surrounding states. Corner of Massachusetts, a bit of Pennsylvania, a little bit of Vermont, yes, and California. Well, it was basically the same story. Like your own state and a bit of nearby, plus you like California. What did they rate low? It was Mississippi and Alabama and North Dakota again. Same thing, probably same explanation. Those New York students had probably never been to Alabama nor to North Dakota. Have no idea what to do there. There's no big cities to draw them, and they're not nearby. One map showed students from Florida and what they liked. They liked Florida and some of Georgia. California, well, it was just barely in the top ratings. Maybe if you've got Florida, California seems like it has many of the same sort of things. So maybe you don't need to go to California if you're from Florida. What did they not like? Mississippi and everything in the north. Maybe that was a weather and comfort thing too. If you like the weather and you love living in Florida over the weather, Are you going to go for vacation in Montana? Maybe less likely. Okay. Well, these maps, as I'm describing, fit what we've just seen with you of states you've been in and reasons for traveling or not traveling to those states. And they're very geographic ideas. All right, so multiple choice. Which country's people average the most trips per year? Which country's people average the most trips per year? 5 seconds. All right, we're leaning towards the United States. Of course, I am arguing that we have the most mobile society in the world. Well, it turns out that, okay, these are the top 5 in order again. So actually, Finland came out number 1 and the United States number 2. Okay, we don't have to be number 1 on every measure to be the most mobile society in the world. We're number 2 on this one. We were number 1 on the previous chart. All right, but interesting too, I think, that Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway, the other 4 of the top 5, are all in Northern Europe. And I wonder if this too may have some geographic reasons for it, that in winter, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway are all cold, snowy places. And those are all fairly prosperous countries. Wouldn't surprise me that a lot of this chart here, trips per year, is people in these Northern European countries going to Southern European countries for winter vacation. Go down to the Mediterranean seacoast of Spain or Italy for a much warmer experience in January. Yeah. All right, I have some other data for you on this topic of mobility, specifically for migration. Now, migration is part of mobility. It's considered to be a permanent change in residence. It's not that you're commuting from work and coming back at the end of the day. That is mobility. That's not migration. Migration is intended to be, you've changed and you're not moving back again. Permanent change. All right, and specifically, I have data about Minnesota from 2015. And the data shows where Minnesotans went to, and also the data includes from where people moved to Minnesota. So we have people leaving Minnesota and we have people moving into Minnesota. So we'll start with people leaving Minnesota. Where did they go? Well, which one of these is not a top 10 destinations of migrants from Minnesota? So some people in Minnesota left and moved to Wisconsin, some moved to California, some moved to Montana, some moved to North Dakota, some moved to Illinois. But which one of those was not a top 10 destination? Five seconds. Okay, well, we're not sure on this one, are we? So we've got answers all across, and that's fine. Let's think about it. So, migrants from Minnesota. What would be easy? What would be easy? Well, the answer is that it's not Montana, not going to Montana so much. Here's the top 10. What would be easy? Well, moving to Wisconsin would be easy, wouldn't it? Because it's right next door. So the number 1 destination for Minnesotans, Wisconsin. Number 2 is North Dakota. Easy. It's a bordering state for Minnesota. Go down the list. Number 10 is South Dakota. Again, bordering Minnesota. And number 4 is Iowa, the other side, the southern border with Minnesota. So the 4 states that border Minnesota are all in the top 10 as destinations. Sure, Minnesotans know what those places are like, maybe have already visited those places. They're somewhat similar to Minnesota. And yeah, it's going to be less costly to migrate there than to migrate to Oregon or North Carolina or Texas, farther away places. All right, but some people did move to places not next to Minnesota. Number 3 is Arizona. I think that's probably mostly retirement or significantly retirement. Colorado, Florida, Texas, California, Illinois are in the top there. Okay, well, those tend to be big states, don't they? Florida and California, we've already cited as popular states. And those states tend to have big cities, don't they? Denver's in Colorado. Florida has several cities. Texas, several cities. California, several cities. And of course, here we have Chicago. What does Montana have? Well, none of those things. It's not a bordering state, so it's farther away, but there's no big cities to draw. There's no great coastlines. There's no wonderful weather. No, not in our top 10. All right, so now we'll flip the direction. The first one was moving away from Minnesota, and now this is going to be moving into Minnesota. So, which is not a top 10 origin? So some people left Wisconsin and moved to Minnesota. Some people left California and moved to Minnesota. Some left Illinois, some left North Dakota, some left Colorado to move to Minnesota. But which of these is not a top 10 origin? Not. Five seconds. All right, so we like California and Colorado the most. All right, no one's voting for North Dakota. Well, that's good. North Dakota is not the correct answer. All right, but let's see which is and why. Colorado is the correct answer. Colorado is not a top 10 provider of migrants to Minnesota. But I mean, state California is, and that maybe is a little surprising to us. But here's the top 10. And notice that Wisconsin, again, is number 1. In fact, it's almost a wash. It's almost even the directions there. Minnesotans moving to Wisconsin, Wisconsinites moving to Minnesota, it almost cancels out. North Dakota is number 2 again, Iowa number 3, South Dakota number 6. All right, so again, the 4 states that border Minnesota are all in the top 10 of providing migrants to Minnesota. But notice that California is 5th, and that probably is a little bit non-intuitive. Why would people leave California to move to Minnesota? Well, there are well over 30 million people living in California. How many moved to Minnesota that year? 6,739. When 6,739 people left California, did the 30 million people there notice? Probably not. Almost 7,000 out of well over 30 million is not very many. There are undoubtedly quite a few states out there that have California as one of their major providers of migrants, because California is such a big place that even some going away can be a big deal for a different state. Yep. And so what else do we have? Illinois is out there again, Texas, New York out there, states with big cities and, well, plenty of people. So some of them moved to other places, including Minnesota. Well, that brings me back to this that we talked about long ago in What is Geography? Do you remember this one? The most important law of geography, Tobler's first law of geography. Everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related than distant things. Yes, a few weeks ago, we mentioned this. We talked a bit about it. We said sometimes it's just common sense. Yeah, things that are closer tends to be more interacting with us than things that are farther away. Well, that makes sense of what we've just seen, doesn't it? It makes sense about the states you've been to and states you haven't. It makes sense about which states were rated well by students. And it makes sense now on Minnesota migration. The states that are next to Minnesota tend to be the most commonly involved with migration to or from Minnesota. All right, and that corresponds with Ravenstein's first law of migration, which is this: most moves are short distance. We consider Arthur Ravenstein to be the father of the study of migration, because he was the first to write and publish an analysis of migration. And he did this late in the 19th century, not the 20th century, the 19th century. So over 100 years ago now. And we give him a lot of credit because his laws worked then and they work now. His first law, most moves are short distance. That was true then, it's true now. And we just saw that with my Minnesota data. Most of those moves involving Minnesota were short distance. They were in one of the 4 neighboring states. But not all of Minnesotans' moves were like that. Well, that fits the second law from Ravenstein. He says, if long distance, then most moves are to cities. Yes, some Californians moved to Minnesota. Very likely they moved to the Twin Cities. Maybe a somewhat smaller city like Duluth or Rochester, but definitely not to a village of 800 people. No, when you move 2,000 miles, you don't move to a little tiny place. Very likely you move to a city. And quite likely it's because of a job. Lots of our long distance moves in the United States are job connected. And most jobs involve cities. Okay, we give Ravenstein a lot of credit. All right, we can also break down migration into 2 broad categories. 2 broad categories, push and pull. So push migration and pull migration. Push migration says that where you are is bad news. You feel pushed out of where you are. It's dangerous. There's a disaster. You need to leave. Well, we see this right now in Ukraine, for instance, where people are fleeing because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And many people are becoming refugees in nearby countries. We see this from natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, those sorts of things. Your home may have been destroyed in a hurricane. An earthquake may have destroyed buildings and your home again. You may have nothing. You may have to leave for safety. You may not even know where you're going. You just know that your place has pushed you out. Now, in the United States, yeah, we have some of this, mostly natural disasters. Tornado strikes and destroys a town. Okay, people have to leave. In the United States, though, we have much more pull migration. We don't usually have the kind of political oppression or religious persecution or war on our land that can cause other push migration. We have mostly pull migration. Pull doesn't say that where you are is bad. It says that the other place seems to be better, and the other place is pulling you there. The big city, the bright lights, the job opportunities may be pulling you to the big city. And that then is very geographic because it's a comparison of two different places, where you are now and where you are being pulled, where you think you may move. That often is related to jobs, a new job, a better job, a higher paying job. You're willing to move to a new place. Okay, so very much. Occasionally, there's some other factor in the pull category. Sometimes parents move fairly short distances, but to get into a different school district, that they feel that a particular school district is high quality and they want their kids to go to those schools. So that might be a short distance move, but it's still pulled by, in that case, quality of schools. All right, here's another question for you. Which country shows the greatest likelihood of residents changing address within 5 years? So which of those most likely that people are going to move within the next 5 years? Five seconds. All right, we like the United States on this one. And again, the United States is one of the top 5. We don't always have to be number 1, but we're in the top 5 on another measure of mobility. Well, okay, again, I have these in order. New Zealand is the number 1 answer here. New Zealand has apparently the most likelihood of people moving, at least within 5 years. But we do a lot of this in the United States too. All right, and here it was. Here's the probability in New Zealand, over 50% chance of moving within 5 years. Mobility. Mobility comes in many different ways. We just looked at migration. Commuting, I mentioned commuting. That's a type of mobility. All sorts of things. And like going on vacation, that's mobility. Well, here the question is about lake cabins. Minnesota has a lot of lakes and thus lake cabins. Wisconsin has a lot of lakes and thus lake cabins. But this question says, who owns more nearby, but in different states? Some Minnesotans cross the border and own a lake cabin in Wisconsin. Some Wisconsinites cross the border and own a lake cabin in Minnesota. But which of those two is bigger? Do more Minnesotans go into Wisconsin to buy a lake cabin, or do more Wisconsinites go into Minnesota to own a lake cabin? Cross-border lake cabins. Five seconds. All right, we're voting for Minnesota, for Minnesotans to cross into Wisconsin. Well, I'm going to say this also makes sense geographically. So if we look at the map and we look at Minnesota, we see Minneapolis and St. Paul there, the Twin Cities. That, of course, is the main population center for Minnesota. All right. So sometimes I ask students, if you owned a lake cabin, if your family owned a lake cabin, how far would you be willing to drive on a weekend to that lake cabin? And kind of the most common answer is 3 hours. The 3 hours would be the limit of how far you'd be willing to drive. That if it gets that much more than that, it starts to feel like you drove there and was long and tiring, and now you got there and you got to go back. It's too far. All right, so look at the map of Minnesota and start in the Twin Cities. Now drive 3 hours. Where are you? Well, you could quite well be still in Minnesota, right? You drive north, you're definitely still in Minnesota after 3 hours. If you drive west, you can get close to almost to South Dakota in 3 hours. If you drive south, you could go into Iowa in 3 hours. But look at that. If you go east only a little bit, you're into Wisconsin. So there'd be quite a few choices in Wisconsin within 3 hours of the Twin Cities. All right, compare that to Wisconsin. Where's the biggest population in Wisconsin? Of course, that's Milwaukee. Drive 3 hours from Milwaukee. Well, you could drive south to get into Illinois, but Illinois is not as well known for lakes anyway. You could drive east. No, you can't. That's Lake Michigan. You could drive north 3 hours and yes, still easily be in Wisconsin. You could drive west 3 hours. From Milwaukee, driving west 3 hours, can you get to Minnesota? Not unless you're driving really, really fast. So think about that. If your limit for a weekend is driving 3 hours and you're in Minneapolis, St. Paul, could you buy a lake cabin in Wisconsin? Oh, yes, sure. If your limit is 3 hours driving one way in a weekend and you live in Milwaukee, could you get to Minnesota? No. So that's the big difference. And so that is the answer. More Minnesotans cross into Wisconsin to buy lake cabins than the other way around because of the distance from the major population centers. Distance keeps coming up. That geographic